Today, we become legends.
So the results of the poll are in, and you guys overwhelmingly wanted to see Fenrir for the next release history video. So pop down to the comments and drop your Fenrir isn't released yet XD memes down there before we get started. You done? Okay, good, let's jump in. So Fenrir was released on May 1st, 2013 in Smite's closed beta phase. Fenrir was an interesting release in that he was extremely reliant on one very broken ability while the rest of his kit was actually pretty bad by modern standards. If you watch my channel, you might know which ability this was. Fenrir's release kit was pretty much the same as it is today aside from numbers. His 2 was significantly weaker, giving 5 up to 25% lifesteal instead of the flat 35% at all ranks it gives now, as well as 50 power at the top end compared to 80 now. His 1 did a teensy bit more damage and his ult did a teensy bit less damage, but overall, Fenrir was a bit weaker than his present day form. That is until we reach a final ability we haven't talked about yet. Brutalize was the thing that broke Fenrir and turned what probably would have been a mediocre to weak god release into one of the most broken and terrifying gods we've ever seen. That might sound like I'm exaggerating a lot, but I'm not, trust me. So Brutalize at release functioned a little differently to now. It was still a 4-hit channeled ability with knock-up immunity. The difference came in what each hit did. As you may know, Fenrir's 3 now does 4 hits of standard ability damage, and while it does hit hard, it was nothing compared to release Fenrir's 3. Instead of doing standard ability damage, Fen 3 at release was essentially 4 basic attacks with an extra 50 plus 30% scaling and damage added onto each one. So already we're looking at around 500 base damage total with 130% scaling on each hit of the ability, since physical basic attacks in Smite scale at 100% by default. So the grand total for this ability was 520% physical scaling. No joke, this ability could one-shot you if you had no way to interrupt it, which back in 2013, a lot of gods had no way to interrupt this. But 500 base and 520% scaling is only the appetizer for release Brutalize. The main course came in the form of this ability being counted as 4 basic attacks, meaning it would proc in-hand item effects such as Frostbound Hammer, Executioner, and most importantly, Critical Chance. Yep, this ability that was already dealing 2000 plus damage with a full damage build, you can now crit with it and you effectively deal double damage or even more with Deathbringer passive which gave plus 50% crit damage back then. So if we're counting 4 crits with Deathbringer on this ability, it will deal 1250 base damage and 1300% scaling. A Anubis ult has 450% scaling if you hit all 30 ticks. This ability was unmissable and dealt more damage than an Anubis ult. Granted, physical power values are much lower than magical power values, usually about 1/3 to 1/2 of the total power, but even at the low end, 1/3 of 1300% is still 433%, which is basically the same as Goobis ult. But Anubis can lifesteal like crazy while using his ult, right? Fenrir's 3 was a physical ability and so it doesn't lifesteal, that's what Smite has taught me. Well no, because this ability was counted as 4 basic attacks, each hit would lifesteal for the full amount like a normal basic attack does. Meaning not only is release Fen one-shotting you, he's also healing for 25% of that damage just from using his 2, and that's ignoring any item lifesteal he has. All the cripples that exist in Smite today to counter this ability also didn't exist back then. Fenrir was released only shortly after Poseidon, who was the first god ever added to have a cripple, so only one cripple existed in the game back at Fenrir's release. No joke, buying a power potion at level 1, which you could do back then, and brutalizing someone at level 1 with Fenrir would just one-shot them. It was such a busted ability that it turned a pretty meh hit overall into one of the most busted releases of all time. But that's Fenrir's release state, or more accurately, Brutalize's release state. Let's jump into his balance changes over the years and how he got to where he is today. So the first change we saw for Fenrir was 2 days after his release. The physical power on his 2 was nerfed to 30 instead of 50 at the top end. This was probably an attempt to stop people just pressing 2 and one-shotting people, but of course this wasn't really the issue with Fenrir's release whatsoever. The issue was with Brutalize, which was changed about a week later to just deal physical damage and no longer apply on-hit effects. So it wouldn't lifesteal or crit anymore, and it also did significantly less damage, 640 base and 200% scaling as opposed to 500 base and 520% scaling of pre-nerf Brutalize. And of course that was before crit or anything else. In this same patch they realised nerfing Seething Howl was pointless and Brutalize was the problem, so they reverted that nerf here too. So after the Brutalize change, Fenrir fell off super hard, mainly because that was literally the only thing that made him good. So a few buffs came in the following patch on May 15th, 2013, increasing the lifesteal of his 2 and the damage of Brutalize a little bit. A quick fix to the ult not damaging objectives in August 2013 to stop people ulting and doing 500 damage per attack to Fire Giant to melt it, and we have a short break before Fenrir was looked at again. January 2014 brought 2 patches, changing the post-hit delays on his 2 and 3 just to make him AA cancel a little bit better and feel more smooth when fighting. June 2014 in Season 1, we saw a decent power increase to the 2, up to 70 at max rank, as well as 50 extra damage at all ranks of the ultimate. These changes brought these abilities much closer to their present day stats. So aside from bug fixes, Fenrir saw no changes for almost 2 years after this, when in Season 3 he saw some mana changes, as well as flattening the lifesteal on his 2 so you didn't have to rank it up to get the full benefit. Another gap of about a year or so followed until Fen got some pretty nice buffs and improvements in a very minor rework of sorts in late Season 4, patch 4.22. The passive was changed so using the 2 at max runes didn't consume them. The buff was increased to 80 power and 35% lifesteal, the values it still holds today. And the 3 got the protections while channeling to make Fenrir a little less easy to nuke when he brutalizes. And finally, while ulting he got a slight range increase to make it easier to grab people. Aside from a quick change giving him runes on assists and not just kills, Fen had to wait another year until patch 5.21, where he got some mana cost reductions to most of his kit. This happened to a lot of older gods around this time, as old gods tend to have extremely high mana costs compared to newer ones. Fen's costs were as high as 90 on basic abilities, so these were brought down a lot, which really did help his early game in the jungle when clearing camps and the like. So we actually didn't have to wait a whole year this time for Fen's next change. This happened in early Season 6 where there was a bit of a shift in focus to move Fenrir a bit away from relying on his jump so much to focus a little more on Brutalize. The jump was nerfed in damage and cooldown while Brutalize got the cleave damage even while not at full runes, making his jungle and wave clear much more effective without having to use all of his runes. And believe it or not, that's Fenrir's entire Smite history. As of patch 7.5 and this video's release, he's received no new changes. We'll have to see what's in store for the rest of the season and Season 8 onwards. From utterly broken with over 1000% scaling on one ability, to complete garbage, to a pretty balanced state. Fenrir's Smite history has been a bit of a rollercoaster, but a fun one to look at for sure. Let me know your thoughts down below on this one. It was highly requested, so I'm sure a lot of you have something to add here. I'll catch you guys in another video later on. Have a great day, stay safe, and peace out, you nerds.